For years, Prosecutor Richard Langley built his career on one thing: winning at any cost. It didn't matter if the defendants were innocent. It didn't matter if the evidence was fabricated. The system protected men like him. Until Maya Carter walked into his courtroom. A brilliant defense attorney and a black woman who had fought her entire life against a rigged system. Maya was ready to expose the truth. But when she uncovered evidence of corruption that went far beyond Langley, she realized she wasn't just fighting for one innocent man. She was fighting an entire network of power, greed, and injustice, one that would do anything to silence her before the truth got out. And she's about to prove that justice isn't given, it's taken. Subscribe now for more intense, high-stakes stories of power, corruption, and justice. Before we begin, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments. The courtroom was silent as Maya walked toward the defense table, her heels clicking against the polished floor. She could feel the eyes on her, the weight of them. Some were filled with expectation, the few black spectators sitting at the back, hoping she could do the impossible. Some were filled with doubt, the white jurors shifting uncomfortably, already assuming her client was guilty. And then there was Langley. The moment she sat down, he leaned over, lowering his voice just enough for only her to hear. "I'm surprised someone like you made it into law school," he murmured. "Let alone here, standing against me. Someone like you." Maya had heard it before. She had heard it from professors who doubted her abilities. She had heard it from colleagues who mistook her for a court clerk instead of an attorney. She had heard it from judges who treated her words as less valuable than those of white men in the same profession. But hearing it here, in this trial that could determine whether an innocent black man lost his freedom that burned, Maya didn't flinch. Instead, she turned to Langley, her expression icy cold. "Today, you're going to learn what happens when you underestimate people like me." Langley chuckled under his breath, shaking his head. "We'll see about that." He sat back in his chair, oozing confidence. The judge entered. The jury was seated. The trial had begun. Langley stood first, pacing before the jury like a predator circling its prey. "Ladies and gentlemen, this case is simple," he declared. James Holloway Jr. was caught on camera at the scene of the crime. His fingerprints were found on the stolen property. A witness saw him running. The jury nodded along. It sounded convincing. Too convincing. Then it was Maya's turn. She rose slowly, adjusting her blazer. Unlike Langley, she didn't pace. She didn't raise her voice. She simply held up a single document. "This," she said, "is the original police report from the night of the crime." She let the silence stretch before continuing. "The prosecution's version of events? It's missing a few things." She walked to the judge's bench and handed over a second report, one that didn't match Langley's. Langley's jaw tightened. "What exactly are you suggesting?" he snapped. Maya turned, locking eyes with him. "I'm suggesting that someone altered the evidence." A murmur ran through the courtroom. The judge raised an eyebrow. "Ms. Carter, are you accusing the prosecution of falsifying reports?" Maya didn't hesitate. "I'm accusing someone of tampering with the truth." Langley smirked, but his eyes were sharp. "I know this is all very new to you, little girl," he said, loud enough for the jury to hear. "But in the real world, cases are built on evidence, not baseless accusations." The words hung in the air like poison. Maya felt it instantly. The power dynamic. The implication. She was the young black woman in a room full of white men who believed themselves superior. Langley wasn't just dismissing her argument, he was dismissing her very presence. She turned to the judge. "Your Honor," she said, voice clear and firm, "if Mr. Langley continues to refer to me in a demeaning and unprofessional manner, I will be forced to return the favor and call him a forgetful old man who thinks the law only works for people like him." The jury stifled laughs. Even the judge raised an eyebrow. Langley's face darkened. He had expected her to shrink, to play nice. Instead, she had just checked him in front of everyone. Maya folded her arms, waiting. For the first time, Langley was the one at a loss for words. And Maya knew. She had just drawn blood. A tense silence hung in the air. The jury shifted in their seats. The judge studied Langley with mild disapproval. But most importantly, Langley himself was rattled. Maya had seen that look before. Men like him weren't used to being challenged. She had cut through his arrogance, and now he knew this wasn't going to be the easy conviction he had expected. But Langley was dangerous, and men like him didn't go down without a fight. He straightened his tie, forced a thin smile, and turned to the jury. "I apologize if my words were misinterpreted," he said smoothly. "But the facts remain the same. James Holloway Jr. is guilty, and the evidence proves it." Maya tilted her head slightly, watching him recover. "Not so fast, Langley." She turned to the judge. "Your Honor, I'd like to address that so-called evidence." The judge nodded. "Proceed." Maya walked to the evidence table and picked up a police report Langley had submitted. She held it up for the jury to see. "This report," she said, "claims that my client's fingerprints were found on the stolen property." She walked to the jury box, setting the document down carefully. "But what if I told you this isn't the original report?" A ripple of murmurs spread through the jury. Langley's smile slipped. Maya turned to him, her eyes sharp. "I have here," she said, pulling out a second document, "a copy of the original fingerprint analysis, obtained directly from the police department's records." She held both papers side by side. "This version, the one Langley submitted, has been altered." She let the words sink in. "The original report states that while my client's fingerprints were present, so were at least 3 other unidentified sets of prints, ones that mysteriously disappeared in the prosecution's version." Gasps whispered through the courtroom. Langley tensed, but he wasn't finished yet. He let out a dry chuckle. "This is desperate, Ms. Carter. You're accusing law enforcement of fabricating reports now." Maya didn't blink. "I don't need to accuse anyone," she said. "The evidence speaks for itself." She turned to the judge. "Your Honor, in light of this discrepancy, I formally request an independent forensic analysis of the fingerprint evidence." Judge Holloway glanced at both documents, his face unreadable. Langley jumped in. "Your Honor, this is a waste of the court's time. The evidence has already been verified, then another verification." "Shouldn't be a problem," Maya cut in smoothly. The judge studied Langley for a long moment, then nodded. "Request granted." Langley stiffened. Maya felt the shift. A crack had formed in his case, and she was about to split it wide open. As court adjourned for the day, Maya gathered her files. She could feel Langley's glare burning into her back. She turned, and he was right there, too close, his voice low, so no one else could hear. "You think you're smart, don't you?" Langley murmured. Maya gave him a calm, collected smile. "No, I know I am." Langley's jaw tightened. "Let me give you some advice, Carter. The jury isn't on your side. They don't trust people like you. They never have." Maya's fingers tightened around the file in her hand. "People like you." There it was again, the unspoken rule of the courtroom. It wasn't just about the law. It was about race. It was about who was allowed to stand in that courtroom with power and who was supposed to stay silent. Maya stepped closer, lowering her voice to match his. "Let me give you some advice, Langley. The difference between you and me. I know how to fight against a system built against me. But you've never had to fight for anything in your life." Langley's face darkened. Maya just smiled and walked away. That night, Maya sat in her office, staring at the reports spread across her desk. She had won today's battle, but Langley wouldn't go down easily. She needed more. Her phone buzzed. A blocked number. Maya frowned but answered. "Carter." A voice deep, nervous, familiar. "Maya, it's Briggs." Maya's breath caught. "Officer Samuel Briggs. The arresting officer in James's case." Maya sat up. "Briggs? Why are you calling me?" A pause. "Then I made a mistake," he whispered. "I need to tell you something." Maya's heart pounded. Langley's entire case rested on Briggs's testimony. If he was having doubts, if he was ready to talk, this could change everything. "Meet me," Briggs said. "Tonight. I'll tell you everything." Maya swallowed. This could be a trap. But if it wasn't, it could be the evidence she needed to bring Langley down for good. She took a deep breath. "I'll be there." Maya sat in her car, gripping the steering wheel, so tightly her knuckles ached. The streetlight above flickered, casting long shadows across the nearly deserted parking lot. She checked her phone. 11:58 p.m. Briggs was late. She tapped her fingers against her thigh, scanning her surroundings. This wasn't just any meeting, it was a risk. If Langley had caught wind that his key witness was about to talk, then Briggs wasn't just in danger. She was too. Her phone buzzed. A message. Blocked number. I see you. Maya's breath hitched. She looked up, scanning the lot, her heart pounding. Then, a shadow moved near the alleyway across the street. A figure stepped forward, Officer Samuel Briggs. He looked nervous, glancing over his shoulder before quickly making his way to her car. Maya unlocked the passenger door. Get in. Briggs slid into the seat, his movements rigid and tense. Sweat clung to his forehead, despite the night's cool air. His hands trembled as he wiped them on his jeans. Maya didn't waste time. Tell me what you know. Briggs exhaled sharply. I shouldn't be here, he muttered. Maya's voice was firm. But you are. A long pause. Then, finally, he spoke. I lied, he admitted. His voice cracked. In court. In my report. About the fingerprints, the witness statement, everything. Maya felt the words hit her like a blow. She had suspected it, but hearing it confirmed aloud, that was different. She forced herself to stay calm. Why? Briggs let out a bitter laugh. Because Langley told me to. Maya's stomach tightened. Briggs ran a hand through his short-cropped hair. I didn't want to do it. But Langley, he's got connections. He made it clear that if I didn't go along with the case, I'd lose my badge. His voice dropped. Or worse. Maya swallowed hard. Worse. Briggs hesitated. Then, almost too quietly, he said, You think this is just Langley? He shook his head. You don't get it, Carter. This is bigger than him. Bigger than me. There are judges, cops, officials, all of them making sure the right people stay behind bars. Maya's blood ran cold. This wasn't just about Langley. This was about a system designed to break people like James Holloway Jr. Maya leaned forward. Then let's break them first. Briggs looked at her, his eyes filled with fear and guilt. You don't understand. If I go public, if I testify, they'll come for me. Maya held his gaze. They already are. Briggs tensed. What? She showed him her phone. The message. I see you. Briggs' face paled. He turned his head sharply, scanning the parking lot. His breathing quickened. I shouldn't have come, he muttered. I shouldn't have. A loud screech of tires cut him off. Maya snapped her head up. A black SUV came barreling toward them, headlights blinding. Briggs' face drained of color. Oh God. Maya reacted instantly. Get down, she yelled, slamming the car into reverse as the SUV skidded to a stop right in front of them. The passenger door flew open. A man stepped out, gun in hand. Briggs cursed. They found me. Maya didn't wait. She threw the car into drive, tires screeching as she swerved around the SUV and sped off into the night. Her heart raced, her hands tight on the wheel as she glanced in the rearview mirror. The SUV followed. Who the hell are they? Maya shouted. Briggs was shaking. I don't know. They work for someone higher up, someone protecting Langley. I never see faces, just orders. Maya gritted her teeth and slammed the gas, weaving through the empty streets. The SUV gained on them, its tires skidding as it made a sharp turn. Then, gunfire. A bullet shattered the back windshield. Briggs let out a choked scream, ducking as glass rained down on them. Maya clenched her jaw. Stay calm. Stay focused. She spotted a narrow alley up ahead. If she could time it right, hold on, she yelled. She yanked the wheel left, the car barreling into the alleyway, scraping the side against the walls. The SUV overshot the turn, screeching as the driver tried to correct. Maya didn't wait to see if they succeeded. She floored it. The alley spat them out onto another road, and she took a sharp right, dodging into the densely packed streets of the city. Finally, no headlights behind them. She kept driving for several more blocks, pulse hammering, before pulling into a shadowed parking lot. She killed the engine. Silence. Briggs was shaking violently beside her. Maya turned to him. You okay? Briggs let out a shaky breath. No, she exhaled. Yeah, me, neither. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then, Briggs looked at her with pure desperation. I'll testify, he whispered. I'll tell the truth. Everything. Maya's heart jumped. This was it. The piece she needed. The proof that Langley had built his career on lies. But then Briggs grabbed her arm, his eyes wild with fear. But you have to protect me. You have to promise. Maya didn't hesitate. I promise. Briggs swallowed hard and nodded. And deep down, Maya knew this wasn't just about saving Briggs. This was about taking the whole damn system down. And she had just fired the first shot. Maya sat across from Officer Briggs in a dimly lit motel room, the scent of stale coffee and cigarette smoke clinging to the air. It wasn't safe to go home. Not after what had just happened. The black SUV, the gunfire, the attempt to silence them, whoever was protecting Langley, was getting desperate. Briggs sat hunched over, his hands shaking as he nursed a cup of bad motel coffee. His face was still pale, his eyes darting toward the door every few minutes, as if expecting men in suits to burst in and finish what they started. Maya folded her hands on the table. You're safe here. Briggs let out a dry, humorless laugh. Safe? After tonight? Carter, I'm already dead. They'll come for me. It's just a matter of when. Maya's jaw tightened. Not if we take them down first. Briggs scoffed. You think exposing Langley will stop this? He's just one piece of something bigger. You said you wanted the truth? Fine. But the truth is this system isn't broken, Maya. It was built this way. Maya already knew that. She had seen it too many times, the way black defendants were railroaded into convictions, the way juries saw their skin before they saw their case, the way prosecutors like Langley used fear, manipulation, and lies to keep the system exactly as it was. But this time, she had something different. She had Briggs. She leaned forward. Then let's burn the whole thing down. Briggs stared at her for a long moment. Then, finally, he sighed. All right, he said. You want names? I'll give you names. Briggs pulled out a crumpled notebook from his jacket and slid it across the table. Maya opened it, scanning the handwritten notes inside. The first name didn't surprise her. Langley. But the second name made her breath catch. Judge Vincent Delacroix. A federal judge. One of the most powerful figures in the city. A man who had ruled on countless cases, many of which involved black defendants who never stood a chance. Maya glanced up. Delacroix? He's involved. Briggs nodded, his fingers tapping against his knee. He's not just involved. He's the one who made this possible. Langley is just his attack dog. But Delacroix? He's the one who decides who wins, who loses, and who disappears. Maya's stomach twisted. Judge Vincent Delacroix was untouchable. Or, at least, he had been. Maya. Set the notebook down. Do you have proof? Briggs swallowed hard. There's a storage unit. Records, files, things that were meant to be buried. His voice dropped. But if we go after Delacroix, we're not just fighting one corrupt judge. We're going up against the entire system that protects him. Maya felt her pulse quicken. This was bigger than she had imagined. But that only made her more determined. She picked up her phone and dialed. Vanessa Blake answered on the second ring. Tell me you have something. Maya didn't waste time. I need your help. We're not just taking down Langley anymore. We're taking down Delacroix. A pause. Then Vanessa let out a slow, impressed whistle. Damn, Carter. You don't aim small, do you? Maya glanced at Briggs. No, I don't. Vanessa's voice was sharper now. Where do we start? Maya closed the notebook. We find that storage unit. 2 hours later, Maya, Briggs, and Vanessa stood outside a rundown storage facility on the city's outskirts. The neon sign flickered, barely holding on to life. Briggs shifted nervously. If they find us here, they won't, Vanessa said, holding up a set of bolt cutters. Let's move. They found the unit. Briggs had mentioned number 17A, and Vanessa quickly snapped the lock. The metal door groaned as Maya pulled it up. Inside, dust covered everything. Old filing cabinets stood against the walls. stacks of boxes leaning against them. Maya's heart pounded as she stepped inside. They started digging. Briggs opened a file cabinet and cursed. "These are case files. Dozens of them." He held up a yellowed folder, the name on the front sending a chill through Maya. Holloway, James Jr. Maya snatched it from his hands and flipped it open. Inside were documents Langley had never turned over: police memos, notes from private meetings with the DA's office, and something else, a letter from Delacroix. Maya's breath hitched. The letter was short, but it said everything. Ensure conviction. No exceptions. She turned to Vanessa. "Get your camera out. We're documenting everything." Vanessa nodded and started recording as Maya moved deeper into the storage unit, rifling through boxes. She pulled out another file, this one labeled sealed evidence, and opened it. What she saw made her blood turn to ice. A list of names. Dozens of them. Every single one a wrongful conviction. Vanessa lowered her phone. Jesus. Briggs ran a hand down his face. "This is it. This is what you need to take them down." Maya exhaled, gripping the files. "We don't just have enough to take them down." She looked up, eyes blazing. "We have enough to destroy them." As they walked out of the storage unit, Vanessa stuffed the evidence into her bag. "We take this to the press, the feds, the Supreme Court if we have to." Briggs nodded. "We have to move fast. They won't let this slide." Maya was about to respond when her phone buzzed. A message. Blocked number. She hesitated, then opened it. "Turn back now, Carter. You won't get another warning." Maya tightened her grip on the phone. They knew. Vanessa peered over her shoulder. "They're scared." Maya smirked. They should be. Because for the first time, they weren't the ones holding all the power. Maya looked at Briggs. "You still willing to testify?" Briggs exhaled slowly, then nodded. "Yeah. Let's finish this." Maya nodded. Because now there was no turning back. Tomorrow, the world would know the truth. The city skyline was still cloaked in darkness when Maya, Vanessa, and Briggs left the storage facility. The files they carried were more than just evidence, they were a death sentence for the corrupt men who built their careers on stolen freedom. Langley, Delacroix, the police officers, the judges, the prosecutors who had buried hundreds of innocent lives in a broken system. And now, that system was about to collapse. But first, they had to survive the night. Back at Vanessa's downtown apartment, the three of them gathered around her laptop. Maya spread the files out on the table. "We need to release this before they can silence us." Vanessa's fingers flew over the keyboard. "I'm uploading copies to 3 secure locations. If anything happens to us, this evidence will still get out." Maya turned to Briggs. "Once we go public, we'll need your testimony. The people won't just believe files, they need to hear it from someone who was on the inside." Briggs swallowed hard. "I know. And I'll do it." Maya studied him. "Are you sure?" Briggs let out a bitter laugh. "I should have been sure a long time ago." Vanessa glanced at them. "We should move soon. Once this goes live, Langley and Delacroix will come at us with everything they have." Maya nodded. "Then let's make sure they never recover." She reached for her phone and dialed. A groggy voice answered. "Carter? It's late." David Lee, her mentor. The only lawyer in the city she trusted completely. Maya didn't waste time. "David, I have enough evidence to take down Langley, Delacroix, and half the corrupt officials in this city." Silence. "Then where are you?" "Vanessa's apartment. We need legal protection before we go public." David exhaled. "Stay put. I'm on my way." 20 minutes later, David arrived. His face was tense, his usual confidence replaced by concern. "You realize what you're doing, right?" he said the moment he walked in. "You're not just taking down a corrupt prosecutor. You're going after people who own the system." Maya nodded. "That's the point." David sat down, rubbing his temples. "This has to be airtight. If there's even a crack, they'll turn it around on you." Maya slid a folder toward him. "Everything we have. Testimonies. Falsified evidence reports. Bank transfers linked to Delacroix." David's eyes widened as he read. "This is enough to bury them." Vanessa leaned back in her chair. That's the plan. David nodded slowly. All right, I'll make some calls. We go public at noon tomorrow. Maya exhaled, tension leaving her shoulders for the first time. They were going to win. Then a knock at the door. Vanessa stiffened. No one else knows we're here. Briggs went pale. Oh, hell no. Maya gestured for everyone to stay quiet. She moved toward the door, peering through the peephole. Two men in suits stood outside. Federal agents. Maya's stomach dropped. She turned back. Feds. David frowned. That's too fast. Then realization hit. David's face darkened. Maya's pulse spiked. She whipped around to Briggs, but his face said everything. The guilt. The fear. He had already talked. No, Maya whispered. Tell me you didn't. Briggs opened his mouth, but no words came out. Vanessa's chair scraped back as she stood. You sold us out. Briggs shook his head violently. They caught me before I got here. Said they'd cut me a deal if I told them where you were. I didn't have a choice, Maya. Maya felt sick. Of course you had a choice, she said, voice barely above a whisper. Briggs looked broken, but that didn't change the truth. He had just handed them over to the same people they were trying to take down. A loud bang on the door. Federal agents. Open up. David cursed under his breath. We need to move. Now. Maya clenched her fists, anger roaring through her veins, but she didn't have time to deal with Briggs now. The truth was out. And now so were they. Vanessa grabbed her laptop. David pocketed the most damning evidence. Maya turned to Briggs one last time. If we get through this, don't ever think about calling me again. Briggs looked down, shame etched into every line of his face. Maya didn't wait for him to respond. She grabbed her bag, nodded to Vanessa, and together, they slipped out the fire escape just as the front door burst open. From the alleyway, Maya heard the agents shouting. Where is she? Briggs hesitated. Then she's gone. Maya didn't stop to look back. She, Vanessa, and David disappeared into the night. By morning, the headlines were everywhere. Corruption in the courts. Explosive evidence links federal judge to illegal convictions. Prosecutor Langley under investigation amid allegations of falsified cases. Whistleblower Maya Carter goes into hiding. What will she do next? Maya stared at the news feed from their new safe house, her heart pounding. The world finally knew the truth. But Delacroix wasn't in handcuffs. Langley was still free. And somewhere out there, they were already planning their next move. Vanessa sat beside her. We're not done, are we? Maya exhaled. Not even close. David crossed his arms. What's the next step? Maya closed her laptop, determination settling deep in her bones. We take them down. All of them. Because this wasn't just about James Holloway Jr. This was about every innocent person still trapped in the system Langley and Delacroix built. And Maya Carter was going to burn it to the ground. Maya sat in the dimly lit safe house, the weight of the last 24 hours pressing down on her like a lead blanket. They had gone public. Langley was being investigated. Delacroix's name was now tied to one of the biggest corruption scandals the city had ever seen. But instead of victory, all Maya felt was the suffocating weight of unfinished business. Because Langley and Delacroix weren't in handcuffs. They were still out there, still pulling strings, still rewriting the rules in their favor. And if Maya had learned anything, it was this. Corrupt men don't wait to be taken down. They strike first. Vanessa sat across from her, scrolling through news alerts. The feds are dragging their feet, she muttered. They say they're investigating Delacroix, but he's got friends in the system. If we don't do something, he's going to walk. David nodded grimly. Langley, too. He's already calling in favors. If we don't keep the pressure on, they'll make this all disappear. Maya took a slow breath, trying to quiet the storm in her head. She had been fighting this case for so long, she could almost hear Langley's voice, mocking her. You think you can win, little girl? You think this system will let you take me down? Her fists clenched. No, she wasn't going to let them rewrite this story. Then her phone buzzed. A blocked number. She glanced at Vanessa and David, then answered. Carter. A familiar voice chilled her to the bone. I warned you, Langley. Maya's grip tightened on the phone. Enjoying the headlines, Langley? A low chuckle. Oh, Maya, you're so predictable. You think you've won something. She stayed silent. Langley continued. You should have walked away. But now, you've left me no choice. Maya's heart hammered. What are you talking about? A pause. Then go check your email. Click. The line went dead. Maya felt her stomach twist as she grabbed her laptop. She opened her inbox. One new message. No subject. She clicked, and her blood ran cold. A photo of James Holloway Jr. bound to a chair, bruised, bloodied, a gun pressed against his temple. A single message attached, call off your crusade, or he dies. Maya felt like the ground had been ripped out from under her. Vanessa's voice was distant. Maya? What is it? Maya couldn't answer. She just turned the screen toward them. David swore. Vanessa's face drained of color. Maya forced herself to breathe, to think. James was the one thing Langley still had control over. The one way to stop her. And Langley thought she would fold. That was his second mistake. His first was not killing her when he had the chance. Maya shut the laptop and stood. We're getting him back. David rubbed his temples. Maya, if you go after James, you'll be walking into a trap. Maya met his gaze, her voice steady as stone. They want me scared. They want me to stop. Her jaw clenched. They want me to believe there's no way to win. She looked at Vanessa. Do you still have access to police scanners? Vanessa blinked, then nodded. Yeah. Then find out where they're holding him. David sighed, rubbing a hand down his face. This is insane. Maya turned to him. So is letting them win. David exhaled. I'll get us some backup. Maya nodded once. Because now, this wasn't about the trial. It was about survival. 2 hours later, Vanessa cracked into an off-the-books police frequency. She caught one chilling sentence. Subject secured. Orders to relocate in 1 hour. Vanessa grabbed a map, spreading it across the table. It's got to be a warehouse or a private property. Cops don't move hostages through station cells. Maya traced her finger across a cluster of abandoned docks on the east side. Here. Langley used to run cases through these properties, easy to control, no security cameras. David nodded. Then we need to move before they do. Maya grabbed her coat. Let's go. They pulled up to the docks, headlights off. The area was silent, except for the occasional lap of water against the shore. Maya scanned the warehouse ahead. 2 men stood outside, talking, armed. David leaned in. We can't just walk in there. Maya's mind raced. Then she turned to Vanessa. Do you still have the number of that reporter from Channel 5? Vanessa's eyes flickered with understanding. Yeah. Why? Maya smirked. Call her. Tell her to bring a news crew. David blinked. You want cameras? Maya nodded. They wouldn't dare kill him if the world is watching. Vanessa grinned. Now that's dirty. Maya's smile faded. No, that's justice. 20 minutes later, the headlights of a news van cut through the darkness. The guards at the warehouse froze. The red light on the camera blinked to life. Maya stepped forward, fearless, as the reporter began speaking. We are live outside an abandoned warehouse, where sources indicate that key witness James Holloway Jr. is being held against his, the doors to the warehouse burst open. Langley himself stepped out. His face was twisted with rage, but he couldn't stop the cameras now. Maya held up the files in her hand. You want to talk about guilt, Langley? Let's start with yours. The police sirens wailed in the distance. The camera zoomed in. Langley's eyes darted around, searching for an escape. There was none. Inside, officers found James barely conscious, but alive. And as the police handcuffed Langley, Maya leaned in close and whispered, I told you never to underestimate me. Langley's face drained of color. Because he knew. He had lost. And Maya Carter had won. By morning, the headlines were everywhere. Corrupt Prosecutor Langley arrested Judge Delacroix under investigation. James Holloway Jr. rescued, a broken system finally exposed. Maya Carter, the lawyer who took down the powerful. Maya sat in the safe house, exhausted, bruised, but alive. David raised a glass. To the woman who did the impossible. Maya smiled. Because this wasn't just her victory. It was justice finally being served. And tomorrow, they would finish what they started. The courtroom was packed. Every seat was filled with reporters, legal analysts, and civilians who had spent years watching the system crush people like James Holloway Jr. But today, it wasn't James on trial. It was Langley. And this time, Maya Carter wasn't the defense. She was the prosecution. Langley sat at the defendant's table, dressed in a gray suit that did nothing to hide the fact that he was a broken man. His usual smug confidence was gone, replaced with the tense, haunted expression of someone who knew he had lost. Judge Holloway James's father presided over the case. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Maya stood, buttoning her blazer as she approached the jury. For years, Richard Langley built his career on lies. He manipulated evidence, coerced witnesses, and sent innocent people, mostly black men, to prison to advance his own career. She paced slowly, letting the weight of her words settle. But this case isn't just about one corrupt prosecutor. She turned, locking eyes with the jury. It's about a system that let him do it. The room was silent. Langley's attorney, a high-priced defense lawyer hired by his remaining allies, stood. Objection. Ms. Carter is making this about race rather than the actual crimes committed. Maya didn't blink. Your Honor, race is the crime here. Langley didn't just frame people, he framed black people. He used their skin as proof of guilt, and this court needs to acknowledge that truth. Judge Holloway held Langley's lawyer in a cold gaze. Overruled. Maya turned back to the jury, her voice calm but unrelenting. We have proof. We have Officer Briggs' testimony confirming that Langley ordered him to alter police reports. We have financial records linking him to Judge Delacroix's secret conviction for profit scheme. We have surveillance footage of his men abducting James Holloway Jr. in an attempt to silence him. She took a step closer. This case isn't about doubt. It's about accountability. She turned toward Langley now, speaking directly to him. You spent your career treating the law like a game. Her voice dropped lower. But today you lose. Langley's jaw tightened, but he had nothing left to say. The next witness was called to the stand. Judge Vincent Delacroix. The room shifted. Maya felt the tension coil in the air like a wire stretched too tight. Delacroix had avoided arrest, but now he was being forced to testify against Langley. The judge adjusted his tie, but Maya could see the beads of sweat forming on his forehead. He was still powerful, but he was cornered. Maya approached the stand. Judge Delacroix, how long have you been overseeing cases prosecuted by Richard Langley? Delacroix cleared his throat. 15 years. Maya nodded. And in that time, did you ever question how Langley managed to have such a high conviction rate? Delacroix hesitated. No. Maya raised an eyebrow. No. You never found it strange that nearly every black defendant in his cases was convicted, even when the evidence was questionable? Delacroix shifted uncomfortably. I trusted the process, he said stiffly. Maya took a breath. Let me rephrase. Did you ever receive money or favors in exchange for favorable rulings in Langley's cases? The tension in the room spiked. Delacroix hesitated too long. Then he glanced toward Langley. And in that moment, Maya knew. He was going to betray Langley to save himself. Delacroix sighed, his shoulders dropping slightly. Then he leaned into the microphone. Yes. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Langley's face turned ashen. He shot up from his chair. You coward. Judge Holloway banged his gavel. Order. Maya stayed, perfectly still, watching the panic settle into Langley's eyes. Because that was it. Delacroix had just buried him. The jury deliberated for less than an hour. When they returned, the foreman stood, clearing his throat. On the charge of conspiracy to falsify evidence, we find the defendant guilty. A murmur ran through the room. On the charge of kidnapping and attempted witness intimidation, we find the defendant guilty. Langley stared forward, unmoving. On the charge of perjury and obstruction of justice, we find the defendant guilty. Judge Holloway's gavel slammed down. Richard Langley, I hereby sentence you to 35 years in federal prison. The courtroom erupted. Some people cheered. Some wept. Some simply sat in stunned silence, as if justice was too foreign a concept to process. Maya let out a slow breath. It was over. Langley was let out in handcuffs, his face blank, hollow. And Maya Carter? She had just changed everything. As the courtroom emptied, James Holloway Jr. approached her. He was free now. No chains. No fear in his eyes. Just a man who had fought like hell to survive. He smiled. You did it. Maya shook her head. We did. James exhaled, looking around. I spent so long thinking the system would never change. That it was too big. Too powerful. Maya gave him a small smile. Maybe it is. James frowned. Then why fight? Maya glanced back at the empty courtroom. Because sometimes? She turned back to him. We win. James nodded slowly. Then he shook her hand. Not as a client, but as a man finally given his freedom. By morning, the world knew the truth. Headlines blazed across every major news outlet. Richard Langley sentenced in landmark corruption trial. Judge Delacroix faces federal investigation. Maya Carter, the lawyer who dismantled a broken system. But Maya wasn't thinking about the headlines. She was thinking about the next case. Because this wasn't just about Langley. There were more like him. More men who thought they could use the law to destroy lives. And Maya Carter? She wasn't done. She picked up her briefcase, stepped outside, and walked into her next fight. Because the war for justice never ends. But today, they had won. Maya Carter took on the system and won. But this was more than just a courtroom battle. It was a war against corruption, racism, and the abuse of power. The question is, how many more innocent lives are still trapped in a broken system? How many more Maya Carters will it take before real change happens? This isn't just a story. It's a reminder that the fight for justice is never over. If you love gripping legal dramas, high-stakes corruption cases, and stories where the truth refuses to stay buried, make sure to subscribe. Hit that subscribe button and join us for more intense, powerful stories. Before you go, where in the world are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments.